It's Spain's worst air disaster in 25 years.
It was a tremendous tragedy.
A crash that kills 154 people.
Nuestros pensamientos.
Our thoughts were with our colleagues and the passengers.
Y a los pasajeros.
Investigators face intense pressure to pinpoint the cause.
When you get to the accident site, you need to collect facts.
When you come up with a mechanical irregularity,
did you see anything outside?
It's like, what next?
Right, got it.
Could a minor maintenance issue,
So we're done?
Yep, you're good to go.
have led to this deadly catastrophe? It's 2:14 p.m. at Madrid-Barajas Airport. After being delayed for more than an hour, Spanair Flight 5022 is finally getting back underway. There are 166 passengers on board, many of them looking to escape the stifling heat of Madrid in August.
Everyone was full of anticipation. Everyone wanted to be on their way.
Anna Stefanidis has come to Spain from Sweden. She is on her way to the Canary Islands to meet some friends.
Most of Europe has holidays, different summer holidays in August. I was going to Gran Canaria to meet my girlfriends. We were going to have 1 week's holiday. 4 ladies.
4 damer.
Today, Captain Antonio Luna is in command. A former Spanish Air Force pilot, he's been with Spanair for 9 years.
How's our time? About an hour and a quarter behind schedule.
First Officer Francisco Mulet joined the company just a year and a half ago. Almost all of his 1,300 flight hours are with Spanair.
Maybe we can make it up in the air. Maybe.
The flight began with a morning hop from Barcelona to Madrid. From Madrid, they'll fly 2 hours and 50 minutes south to Gran Canaria in the Canary Islands.
Spanair 5022, Geonex 9 on runway 36 left.
Okay. Here we go.
Preparing for takeoff is an extremely busy time for the flight crew. They've got multiple checklists that they have to run.
Ignition. Set. Spoilers. Armed.
Make certain the aircraft is properly configured, the thrust is set right, the brakes, etc.
Air conditioning.
So there are a plethora of factors that are all running through their minds simultaneously.
And final items we have 8, 11 aligned, 11 stowed.
Spanair 5022, you are cleared for takeoff, runway 36 left.
Cleared for takeoff. Spanair 5022.
Okay, your aircraft.
First Officer Mulet will fly the plane from here.
My aircraft.
At 2:23, the MD-82 aircraft starts speeding down the runway. The captain watches their speed. They can't lift off until they reach 157 knots. Takeoff speed.
It didn't feel right. I thought they were putting in all the power and force that they had, and now we will lift off. But something was just not right.
It's
taking so long. Does that seem right to you?
And then I thought, how long is this runway? We have to lift off now.
V1. Rotate.
An alarm warns the pilots something is going wrong. The first officer increases power, but he's losing control of the plane.
Men sen när vi kom I luften,
When we finally lifted, everything went suddenly to the right, and then I just heard screams and crashing.
skrik och smäll.
The hell you turn off that warning?
The plane is less than 40 feet from the ground.
Men jag hann tänka att
I managed to think, this is my last trip. I've had a good
jag
life.
haft ett bra liv.
I thought, now I die.
Och så tänkte jag, nu dör jag.
Fly the plane. Fly it.
En sak som jag gjorde, det var att jag tog
I put my arms over my head
och
and put my head between my legs.
la huvudet mellan knäna. Att
I protected myself as much as I could.
jag kunde.
Just seconds after takeoff, Flight 5022 slams into a riverbank beside the runway. Airport fire crews are quickly on the scene. The plane with 172 people on board is now shattered wreckage, spread over half a mile. Anna Stefanidis has landed in the water, still strapped to her seat.
När jag vaknade upp så
When I woke up, first there was this quiet. But then I realized I'm not dead. I looked around me.
jag tittade ju runt omkring.
Where am I? What is this?
Det här.
Airport workers have raced to the crash site to try to help, but they can't get to Anna.
De här räddnings...
The emergency personnel were calling to me. Come on. Come on, hurry, now.
Kom igen. Nu är det dags.
She's in the middle of the stream, tangled in debris and sinking fast.
Men
I have no idea how I managed to get free.
Somehow, Anna makes it to the water's edge where rescuers help her to safety. She's in shock and suffering from a serious leg injury, but she's alive.
det var kaos. Det var något...
It was chaos. It was so horrible.
Men jag kom upp.
But I got out.
In spite of the massive rescue effort, only 18 people survive. 147 passengers are dead. So are both pilots.
It was a tremendous tragedy. All the country was affected by that.
This is Spain's worst aviation disaster in 25 years.
Our thoughts were with our colleagues and the passengers. It was a Spanish company, so many of our colleagues were flying that type of plane. It was a very difficult time.
Spain quickly recruits an international team of experts to investigate the crash. They have a massive puzzle to piece together. How could a sophisticated jet, manned by an experienced crew,
Rotate.
crash on takeoff on a sunny afternoon?
Okay, people. It looks like we have our work cut out for us.
Juan Carlos Lozano is an investigator with the Spanish Pilots Union.
The accident site at the beginning is considered like a crime scene. It's very important to find out how the pieces are located, because that will give you a lot of information.
It's demanding work, searching acres of rough terrain for shattered pieces of scorched debris, all under the blazing Madrid sun.
It was difficult, the heat, because it was a very hot summer. So the heat was probably one of the worst things.
Understanding what happened to Flight 5022 is going to be one of the most difficult tasks these air crash investigators have ever faced. Investigators into the crash of Spanair Flight 5022 immediately focus their efforts on recovering the plane's 2 black boxes, or flight recorders.
For an investigator, the FDR is one of the most vital records that we can get, because everything that is working, or it is not working, or it's causing an issue, will be recorded there.
Once they download the data, it could provide vital clues about what went wrong.
Let's get this to the lab, ASAP, okay?
Meanwhile, the nation mourns. The Prime Minister visits the crash site. The King and Queen and the Mayor of Madrid gather to console the grieving families. The pressure to announce a cause is intense.
The press was putting a lot of pressure on the investigators to give answers, even before they had any idea what could have happened.
No tengo nada de ninguna información. Es que no tengo.
At the crash site, marks on the ground paint a vivid picture.
Here's our first impact.
Revealing just how quickly Flight 5022 turned to disaster. The first impact marks are just 200 feet from the runway. The plane then passed over a road and slid another 1,800 feet before crashing on the far side of a river.
This airplane left a trail coming from the runway to the edge of the airport boundary. So it was quite clear for the investigation that the airplane had a big problem just on liftoff.
The timing immediately suggests a theory that might explain the crash.
Let's take a look at this engine.
When an aircraft gets only 30 feet off the ground and falls uncontrollably back to the ground, you have to wonder, were the engines operating correctly?
Engine power is especially crucial during the first few moments of flight. If the plane doesn't have enough power, it won't achieve the speed it needs to overcome drag and get airborne. Investigators study the engines, searching for any sign of malfunction. Both are filled with debris, mud, and grass ingested during the crash.
If we find mud, soil, or grass throughout the engine, we can determine that the engine was fully operational at the time of the accident. In this case, we found traces all around the engine.
The finding means the engines were spinning at high speed when they hit the ground. It wasn't engine failure that doomed the plane.
Right. The engines were fine. But something stopped that plane from climbing.
Investigators need a new theory to explain why the MD-82 couldn't climb.
What was it? I want maintenance records, weather reports, pilot records, the works. Let's get to work, people.
For an accident investigator, it's very, very important not to establish any presumptions. You need to collect facts.
Okay, let's see what the numbers tell us.
Investigators know that for any takeoff, the plane's weight and balance must be carefully calculated.
The aircraft needs to be carefully balanced in order to get its better performance. So when you are taking off, you need to be sure that the aircraft has been properly balanced and the weight is correct.
They review the passenger manifest, cargo, and fuel load. They need to check the total weight, as well as where the loads were carried, to see if the plane's center of gravity shifted dangerously forward or back. But it's soon clear this isn't the smoking gun they're looking for.
Well, there's nothing wrong with her takeoff weight.
Controllers in the tower provide a more promising lead. They tell investigators that the Spanair crew called off an earlier takeoff.
They had some kind of maintenance issue right before takeoff.
The plane was at the threshold of the runway when the pilots noticed a temperature gauge was giving them faulty readings.
Madrid, Spanair 5022. We have a slight problem.
We have to exit the runway.
5022, taxi to Apron Tango 2, Stand Romeo 11.
Controllers cleared the MD-82 to return to the terminal.
You've spent the last 45 minutes totally focused on getting that aircraft to the runway. And when you come up with a mechanical irregularity, it's like, what next? It's a showstopper.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing a minor technical problem. We're just going to head back to the terminal to see if we can sort this out.
Normally, the passengers are more comfortable after a clear and direct explanation on what's going on.
Well, I guess we're not going anywhere just yet.
Men jag tänkte, nej, vad ska jag oroa mig?
I thought, why should I worry? I've bought my ticket. I've paid for my ticket. I want to get there, and I will. So they will have to do their job and fix this.
Göra sitt jobb och fixa det här.
Could the last-minute repair be the key to explaining the crash of Flight 5022? Investigators need to know. Spanair Flight 5022 was sent to a remote maintenance area in a far corner of the terminal. It took 9 minutes just to taxi there.
And we're back. Shutting down the engines.
By the time they reach the maintenance stand, the plane is already 42 minutes behind schedule. That delay could be an important lead.
On-time performance is taken very, very seriously in the industry. And now that they're substantially behind schedule, the pressure is immense.
With the engines shut down, the plane's air conditioning doesn't work. Sitting on the scorching tarmac, temperatures in the plane begin to soar.
Det var hett. Det var så otroligt hett.
It was incredibly hot in the plane.
Aldrig upplevt sån hett.
I've never experienced that kind of heat before.
Maintenance workers give investigators more details about the delay. They were trying to fix a problem with one of the plane's sensors.
Oh, yeah. I took a look, but it wasn't serious.
The sensor, called a ram air temperature probe, juts out from the nose of the plane. It measures the outside air temperature and feeds the information to the engines during flight.
Could you see anything outside?
No, it looks fine. It's not clogged.
The sensor is sending faulty readings to the engines.
No, that didn't work either.
Without it, the automation that adjusts engine power won't work properly.
Look at that. It says 104 degrees now.
The attempted repair eats up more valuable time.
I gotta write all this up. Not to mention the delay, over an hour late at least.
The entire economics of the present air transport industry is built on efficiency. An airplane in the air makes money, an airplane sitting on the ground doesn't. So if you've got an aircraft that isn't where it needs to be, this has thrown a severe complication into the efficiency in the operations of the airline.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We hope to be on the move again very soon.
Maintenance workers explained that they couldn't repair the faulty sensor.
Right, got it.
Instead, they disabled it by cutting the electrical power to the sensor.
They simply try to avoid the symptom, which is the high temperature in the ram air temperature probe, by pulling the circuit breaker.
The quick fix eliminated the faulty readings.
So, we're done?
Yeah, pop the breaker, so you're good to go.
Okay. Thanks.
The maintenance workers have no idea what went wrong on takeoff. Investigators wonder if the disabled temperature probe is somehow linked to the crash.
I don't see how this could cause a problem.
But they quickly confirm the probe is not an essential piece of equipment. The crew simply has to keep track of the air temperature and adjust engine power manually.
There are alternative means to determine what the outside air temperature is. In this case, it's something as simple as just asking ground control or listening to the last official weather report.
But that wasn't the only maintenance issue the crew was facing that day.
It says here the right thrust reverser was disabled as well.
Thrust reversers are used on landing to help the plane slow down. When engaged, bucket doors open to deflect the jet blast and redirect it forward. If a reverser malfunctions and activates during flight, the plane can lose lift and drop out of the sky. That's what happened to Lauda Air Flight 4 in 1991, killing all 223 people on board. Did a faulty reverser somehow activate on takeoff? It seems unlikely, but it would explain the plane's deadly trajectory.
If this thrust reverser had deployed inadvertently, because the jaw movement would have taken the airplane to the right-hand side, which is actually where the airplane crashed.
It's an intriguing theory, but so far, there's not enough evidence to prove it. Investigators study the thrust reversers recovered from the wreckage of Spanair Flight 5022. There's no evidence that the right side reverser deployed. But on the left engine, it's a different story.
Is this the position it was in when you found it?
The reverser is in the deployed position, a potentially deadly configuration.
If one of the thrust reversers deploy inadvertently on takeoff, given that the engines are providing full thrust, that would pose a very big threat for the controllability of the airplane.
Finally, something that points to a serious mechanical problem with the plane, one that might explain the crash of Flight 5022.
A lot of scrape marks.
But as investigators continue to scrutinize the reverser, they realize there's a problem with the theory.
I think it was deployed after impact, as the engine was dragged along the ground.
Distinctive damage to the reverser tells investigators it deployed after the plane came down, not in the air.
All the damage that it had sustained was very easy to compare with the marks on the ground. So that led the investigators to rule out a thrust reverser.
Something else stopped the plane from climbing out. Investigators need to shift gears.
Once you have eliminated the engine failure, you have to think about lift, about the possibility of the aircraft to become airborne.
What kind of wreckage have we recovered from the wings? Get me everything you have.
The plane's wings are equipped with control surfaces, the flaps and slats, that extend at takeoff to help generate lift.
For modern airplanes, the flaps and the slats are probably the most critical parts besides the engines and the wings itself, as it allows the airplane to take off and land in a shorter distance with lower speeds.
If the flaps didn't extend properly, it would result in Flight 5022 not having enough lift to climb. The investigators study the lever mechanism that pilots use to control the flaps.
The flap lever was an essential part of the investigation.
If the lever was driven against the side of its track during impact, it might leave a mark showing how the flaps were set at takeoff.
Well, well, what have we here?
There's a deep scratch at 0 or retracted position. It's a startling finding, one that suggests the flaps on Flight 5022 were not extended for takeoff.
My first reaction as a pilot is that the flaps and slats are absolutely necessary for takeoff. And there's just not going to be a survivable crash if they've attempted takeoff and they weren't extended.
It's hard to believe a professional pilot could forget to set such a vital piece of equipment. Did the flap handle shift during the accident? Or did the pilot somehow fail to set it properly before takeoff?
B1.
My second innate question is, why? What happened to prevent them from being in the right position?
The answer to that question could explain why 154 people died.
Rotates.
In one of Spain's worst air disasters. Investigators dig into the personal and professional histories of the Spanair crew, wondering if the pilots could have made a terrible mistake.
Both qualified, both experienced.
You always check on their experience, if they had any issues during the training, what kind of training they had.
The pilot records turn up nothing significant. Captain Luna and First Officer Moulet are both up to date on all necessary training.
Hard to believe these guys could forget to set their flaps.
El comandante tenía una acreditada reputación.
The commander had an excellent reputation. He was a person who was considered to be very meticulous. He enjoyed flying and took pride in being a professional.
Estar a la altura y manejar el avión de una manera profesional.
Investigators turn to the cockpit voice recorder for answers.
Okay, let's hear it.
Ignition. Set.
Cuando escucha su...
When you listen to a cockpit voice recorder, you're trying to understand the pilots and put yourself in the pilot's situation.
Piloto.
They're listening for anything that might tell them how the flaps were set for takeoff.
Spoilers armed.
The pilots make their final preparations.
And final items we have
8. 11 aligned, 11 stowed.
Including a last-minute check of the flaps that's required right before takeoff.
Hold it, stop right there. Final items. That includes checking the flaps. He called out 11. That's the right setting.
The recording suggests the pilots set the flaps to 11 degrees, exactly where they should be. Perhaps the flap lever did somehow shift after takeoff.
Maybe they did get it right.
I was really shocked that the crew definitely talk about the flap position. And it seems that the flap were not in that position. So that creates a kind of contradictory feeling of saying, wow, these guys were really looking at the flaps or not?
Contradictory evidence threatens to derail the investigation. It's going to take more digging to discover what actually happened in the cockpit of Flight 5022. Questions about the flaps on Spanair 5022 could be settled once and for all with information from the flight data recorder.
Okay, let's hope the data can give us some answers.
It records every detail about the plane's configuration, including flap settings.
Flaps. Set and checked.
Flaps were set at 11 degrees on the first taxi, exactly where they should be.
The data reveals that the flaps were working and had been set correctly when the plane taxied to the runway the first time.
But they didn't stay there.
When the crew returned to the terminal for repairs, they retracted the flaps.
And we're back. Shutting down the engines.
Flaps and slats are retracted after coming off the runway as part of standard operating procedure.
Okay, let's see what happens the next time around.
How's our time?
Investigators need to know, did the pilots extend the flaps again after leaving the maintenance area to return to the runway? Or did they make a fatal error and omit one of the most important steps in getting a plane safely off the ground?
Here we go.
Cuando analizas...
When you analyze a cockpit voice recorder, You look for anomalies, things that are different, things that should not be there.
No deberían estar ahí.
After start checklist.
The MD-82's pre-flight checklists direct the crew to check the flaps and slats 3 separate times.
Ignition, off. Air conditioning, set.
Flaps and slats are essential for the operation of an aircraft, for takeoff and landing. So that's why they appear several times in the checklist.
On the after-start checklist, setting the flaps is the final item.
Hydraulic pumps and valve.
Set and checked.
Lights.
On. Get permission from air traffic control to taxi, will you?
Hold it. What is he doing? This is the worst possible time to interrupt him.
The CVR reveals that just as the first officer is about to check the flaps and slats for the first time, the captain asks him to make a radio call.
Ground, Spanair 5022, requesting taxi instructions.
Spanair 5022.
He never returns to finish that crucial item of the checklist.
This is highly irregular in the normal tempo of a checklist. So what that tells acts investigators is that there's some factors that were irritating this captain, making him want to rush the checklist, get things done quicker. Was it the time schedule? Was it maybe the cockpit heat? It was just unbearably hot in there and he wanted to get the engine started so they could get some air conditioning. That we don't know.
Okay. Let's see what they do for the taxi checklist, please. Spanair 5022, Joe Nixon 9.
Setting the flaps is so important, crews are required to check them again during the taxi checklist.
Brakes, checked. Flight controls, checked. Air conditioning, set.
Whoa. Guys, what's the rush?
La sensación que tuvimos cuando analizamos el grabador de voces de cabina.
The impression we had when we heard the cockpit voice recorder was that the crew was rushing through the checklist.
Que está en una situación apurada.
Transponder, set. Cabin.
Hang on, stop. Where's the takeoff briefing?
The crew skip the flaps and slats check for a second time.
We know from scientific studies that rushing or time pressure increases the chances of human error by 11-fold. You put a pilot into a situation where they have to rush, something like a checklist that's a very detailed item is very prone to errors.
The crew has a third and final chance to set the flaps for takeoff.
Final items we have 8, 11 aligned, 11 stowed.
Spanair 5022, you are clear for... That was awfully quick, no? I think... Center of gravity, 8. Flap display, 11. Horizontal stabilizer, aligned. And flaps again, 11. No way he had time to check all those settings. Let's go back to the checklist.
Investigators suspect that although the first officer announced the flap setting, the announcement was automatic.
Final items we have 8, 11 aligned, 11 stowed.
He wasn't focused on his instruments. He was merely reciting the list from memory. If he had looked at the gauge, he would have seen the flaps were set at 0, not 11.
Spanair 5022.
The captain likely isn't checking either. He's busy steering the plane towards the runway.
Humans are fallible, and we know that when we're multitasking, it's very easy to forget or miss a critical item.
3. Separate checklists. And they never set the flaps.
Investigators now have a terrifying theory to explain the crash of Spanair 5022.
V1, rotate.
The plane couldn't climb because the pilots forgot to extend the all-important flaps before takeoff. To prevent another accident, investigators need to understand the crew's behavior. What was going on inside their heads to make them feel so much pressure to hurry? They dig into the company's books and discover that Spanair has been struggling financially. It has announced plans to cut 1/3 of its workforce.
How's our time?
When your job is on the line, the last thing you want is to fall badly behind schedule.
Es difícil gestionar.
It's difficult to manage the stress that starts building when a delay is getting longer.
La demora se empieza a incrementar.
I'll have some water, thank you.
The captain is also well aware that his 166 overheated passengers are getting more and more unhappy. At the peak of the afternoon sun, the air temperature was 30 degrees Celsius, or 85 Fahrenheit. The tarmac radiates heat, raising the ramp temperature to over 100 degrees.
It must have been scorching hot on that plane.
We've got large windows, the sun is beating in. I assure you that cockpit's gonna be 120. You're wearing a shirt, a tie, it gets unbearably hot.
No doubt about it. Those guys were coping with a lot of pressure.
When you look at all the issues that the flight crew is facing, time, schedule, inoperative components, and a regular procedure to do, it's just human nature for us to rush through the normal procedures.
Psychology helps explain why the crew made the mistake in the first place. But there's another troubling question.
How the hell do you turn off that one?
When the crisis hit, why did the crew think there was something wrong with their engines? If they had realized the flaps had not been set, they might have been able to save their plane. Understanding why they didn't will be the final twist in the tale of Spanair Flight 5022.
Why did the first officer think that it was engine failure?
Investigators wonder if the faulty sensor shut down by the maintenance workers could have played an unexpected role.
So we're taking off using manual thrust, right?
With the sensor disconnected, engine control is no longer automated.
Yeah, manual thrust.
Before takeoff, the first officer mentions this 5 times.
And if we go for manual thrust, then we'll engage the autopilot after takeoff, right?
Right.
The disconnection of the RAM air temperature probe created a lot of concern from the co-pilot's point of view, because that also affects the auto throttle, which is the automatic system for engine power.
Look, just check the weather for the temperatures. It won't be a problem.
The captain reassures him that they can set the thrust levers manually, but the first officer is uncertain.
Okay, got it.
Already preoccupied with the engines, the first officer mistakenly assumes they have an engine problem when things start to go wrong.
Engine failure?
10,000 times you've done these takeoff procedures in this nice, slow, methodical, well thought out way, and now you're inserting a completely irregular event.
But there's another crucial question.
Wait a minute. Where's the warning?
If the flaps were not set in the takeoff position, there should be a very conspicuous sound saying that the aircraft is not ready for takeoff.
The takeoff warning didn't go off, and it should have. I want to know why.
They must now track down a silent culprit, a missing alarm that could have saved Flight 5022.
These failures have to be connected somehow.
Investigators suspect there could be a link between the failure of Flight 5022's takeoff warning and the minor problem that sent the MD-82 back to the terminal, the failure of the temperature sensor.
Look at that, it says 104 degrees now.
Investigators trace the complex electronics of the sensor and make a shocking discovery. The sensor and the takeoff warning both pass through the same electronic relay.
When you look at the electrical scheme of the takeoff warning system, you find that the relay 2.5 controls two things: the heater of the ram air temperature probe and the takeoff warning alert.
That's it. That's the link. Yes.
It was very shocking to find out that two different systems, like the takeoff warning system and the ram air temperature probe heating, were controlled by the same device.
Investigators suspect the R25 relay failed, disabling both the temperature sensor and the takeoff warning. Technicians are not able to recreate that failure in the lab, but for Juan Carlos Lozano, the theory makes sense.
In my opinion, the relay 2.5 was the cause of the failure of the takeoff warning system.
Right, got it.
By opting for the quick fix to the temperature sensor problem, the maintenance crew missed a critical opportunity to find the faulty relay. Without the cockpit alarm, the pilots did not have their final line of defense to warn them of their mistake. Sadly, they were not the first crew to suffer such a fate. In 1987, an MD-82 flying for Northwest Airlines crashed on takeoff from Detroit, killing 156 people. Just like the Spanair crew, the pilots in Detroit failed to set their flaps and slats, but got no warning. A disabled electrical circuit silenced their plane's alarm. After the Detroit crash, checklists were changed to highlight the flaps and slats more often, and the warning system was made more robust, in an effort to prevent such a tragedy from ever happening again. But aviation designers and engineers could not foresee the rare failure of the R25 relay. That failure sealed the fate of Flight 5022.
As an aviation professional, as an accident investigator too, this is probably the most frustrating situation in the world, because when you investigate an accident, is to avoid this to happen again. And unfortunately, in this case, we had a very similar case 20 years after the Detroit accident.
In both Detroit and Madrid, it was the crew's failure to follow their checklists that led to disaster. The Spanair investigators list the inoperative takeoff warning as a contributing factor that prevented the crew from recognizing the danger. But Juan Carlos Lozano, representing the pilots' union, sees it the other way round.
The single biggest failure in this accident is the failure of the takeoff warning system. This system was designed considering that the humans can make mistakes. And this is a clear example that the last line of defense failed.
After the crash of Spanair 5022, Boeing again revised its checklists to make extending flaps and slats more prominent. And electronic checklists are now being used in some planes. Unlike paper checklists, they can display clear messages to the crew to tell them what they have and haven't checked.
We cannot have this absolutely vital safety layer fail. We've got to have a 100% always works system.